Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 7 of What If Naruto was the Jinchuriki of the world leader. If you guys enjoy this what if, and want to see part 8 of it, comment down below, and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. The first thing Naruto saw when he awoke the next was Aime's peaceful sleeping face with a small smile curling her lips. He couldn't help but stroke her soft cheek, watching as she shuffled a little bit and mumbled sleepily. Looking out the window, he noticed that it was around 7 o'clock. Aime would need to get up soon for work, and Naruto himself needed to reunite with the other important people in his life. But that didn't mean he couldn't make breakfast. He attempted to pull away from the sleeping civilian, but her surprisingly strong grip and cute whine cut it short. Carefully maneuvering his pillow, he managed to slip out of her arms, and replace himself with the pillow. Aime frowned in her sleep, noticing the lack of warmth, but smiled and settled back down, after he softly kissed her cheek. Opening the fridge, he found it nearly bare of food, only a jug of nearly expired milk, and an egg carton with a single egg inside of it being the only consumables present. Shaking his head ruefully, Naruto donned his jacket and left the house, heading for store. Waving goodbye to the clerk, leaving the man staring after him with wide eyes, Naruto started back to Aime's apartment, a couple of bags full of food, and ingredients hanging from his arms. Aime woke to the smell of something delicious, and a lack of warmth and definition from her snuggle buddy. Opening her eyes and finding that she was only holding a pillow that still smelled like her fiancé, she smiled. She blushed from her thoughts. Technically, they were engaged to be married, if technically followed a promise made as preteens. Even if it didn't, the civilian waitress didn't care. He was still hers. Even if he was also other girl's fiancé, he was still hers, and that was all that mattered to Aime. Looking at a clock, she realized that time would not stop and let her daydream, and she would have to get to work soon. After dressing in a white shirt and a pair of brown pants, her work outfit, she left her room to find the tall frame of her fiancé hovering over the stove, humming an odd sort of chant to himself while he cooked. While she enjoyed the time, when he was short enough that she could snuggle his head into her chest, Aime also liked his new stature. His size and muscles, which spoke of barely restrained strength and power, coupled with the tenderness with which he held her, and the gentleness of his overall personality made her feel warm and protected, like having a life-size bear to hold at night. She pulled out a chair and sat, just watching as Naruto flipped something, and caught it on a plate, setting with another plate full of food. He picked up the plates and turned around, jumping a little when he found Aime sitting at the table with a small smile on her face that turned into a giggle, when she saw her flowery pink apron draped over his muscular, and otherwise bare chest. "Hey," he said bashfully, a light dusting of red stemming from the embarrassment of being caught in a woman's apron. "Hey Miss Chef," she replied with an impish smile. Naruto gave her a deadpan look, and set a plate in front of her along with a fork. "I didn't want to cook bacon bare-chested. I may be a dragon, but the irrational fear all men have of hot, popping grease runs strong in my blood. This of course, has no effect on being able to bathe in molten rock, for reasons, I guess." Aime giggled and chewed on a piece of the crispy treat, watching very closely as her fiancé pulled off her apron, and started on his breakfast without a shirt. "You kind, sweet and loving bastard. My apron will smell like you all day, and I won't be able to think of anything else." She dug into her own food, enjoying the taste of eggs, thin-cut steak, toast and bacon. All too soon, breakfast was over, and she had to get to work. At the door, Aime and Naruto stood, hugging each other tightly. "I'm so glad you're back," the waitress said, her head resting against his chest. Naruto simply nodded and stroked her back, enjoying the presence of one that he loved. Eventually, they separated, but not before Aime leaned up and pressed her lips to his. "I love you," she whispered quietly. Naruto smiled softly, and kissed her back passionately. "I love you too." Aime grinned happily and held his arm as they left the house. Once they came upon the intersection that would take her to work and him to his apartment, she hopped up and kissed his cheek, skipping away merrily afterwards. Naruto watched her go, then sighed and looked up at his apartment building. "Time to see them again. I hope they've forgiven me." "So, what's this meeting about?" A jonin wearing the standard jonin uniform asked. The thing that stood out about him was the red sash around his waist, and the beard covering his chin. Kakashi, who was walking towards the Hokage tower with him, shrugged blithely. "How would I know, Asuma?" The lazy jonin replied, his nose buried in an orange book. Asuma shrugged and took a pull on his cigarette. "I don't know. Just thought you might." Kakashi shook his head and swerved to avoid smacking into a streetlight. "No." He turned another page and kept reading. "You want to go to a strip club after this?" The smoking jonin shook his head with a grin. "No. I'm gonna see if Kurenai will go on a date with me." Kakashi subtly glanced over at the other jonin, and rolled his eyes. Kunoichi are way too troublesome to deal with, especially in relationships. Not to mention she already has her eyes on another. And if my guesses on her body language are correct, I sincerely doubt she'll even think to look elsewhere. Suit yourself. More for me, I suppose. Asuma glanced over at the other jonin with a thoughtful look. Why'd you go for the civilians, anyway? I mean, it's like a prerequisite that a kunoichi has to be hot, so why not? Kakashi made a firm chop with his free hand. Nope. Not even going to go within 60 miles of there. Civilian women are simple. You show some interest, tell a few stories, show a few scars and bam, Bone Town, population, 2 or 3 if you're lucky. He sighed happily, eyes glazed. Totally and completely simple, nothing complicated there. Plus, they know that you're a ninja, so they kind of expect you to vanish before they wake up. It is fucking awesome. Asuma sighed and shook his head. Kakashi, complicated can sometimes be a good thing. He spotted Kurenai and her best friend Anko chatting happily about something. Asuma jogged ahead of them and opened the door to the Hokage's office for them with a smile. There you go. The red-eyed jonin barely glanced at him, her mind clearly somewhere else, on someone else. Anko gave him a disappointed look. Thanks, Tool. Asuma blinked in shock. Ow. Right in the ego. You be a gentleman and get ignored. Kakashi walked through the door, giving him a knowing glance. Civilian women like gentlemen. They joined the other crowd of jonin and chunin in the office, where the Hokage and the elders, Koharu and Hamura, waited. Now that we are all here, I have an announcement I'd like to make. The Sandaime began, smoke lazily drifting from the bowl of his pipe. The chunin exams are in 2 weeks. Now, since they are taking place in Kumagakure, we need to make a good showing, even if we did sign a treaty with them. Who will nominate their teams? Kakashi stepped forward first, book sequestered away for a change. I, Kakashi Hatake, nominate Team 7, consisting of Suki Uchiha, Sakura Haruno and Hanabi Hyuga for the Chunin exams. The Hokage nodded and looked to Kurenai, who stepped forward with a confident poise. I, Kurenai Yuhi-sun, to be Uzumaki, nominate Team 8, consisting of Shino Aburame, Kiba Inizuka and Hinata Hyuga for the Chunin exams. The old man blew a smoke ring and looked to his son. I, Asuma Sarutobi, nominate Team 10, consisting of Chouji Akamichi, Shikamaru Nara and Ino Yamanaka for the Chunin exams. A few other jonin stepped up, until Yugao stepped forward to gasp of surprise. Many correctly guessed that, since she had returned, so had her wayward student. I, Yugao Yuzuki, nominate Team Yugao, consisting of Yujido Ni, Samui Ni, and Naruto Uzumaki for the Chunin exams. The Sandaime nodded in agreement and scanned over the room. Very well, anyone else? Garrison, Koharu spoke up from his side. Team Yugao does not have enough missions completed to attend the exams. More to the point, one of their members has just returned. I know. Sarutobi sighed heavily. The truth is, we need Naruto in the exams. Out of almost all of the genin of this current generation, he is one that stands out the most, as Konoha no Kakishin. People are expecting him to be there, and it would impact us negatively if he was not. Besides, I looked over their statistics. They only need one more C-rank mission to qualify, so... He pointed at Yugao. Bring your team to my office today for a mission. There are no other announcements, you are dismissed. Grab the necessary paperwork on the way out, and report to me within the week with the results. Asuma approached Kurenai, who was once more chatting with Anko, a wide happy smile on her face. That smile died, as soon as he came near her. Hey Kurenai, do you want to go to dinner with me? She sighed and rolled her ruby eyes. No. He shrugged and continued. Well, we can do something else, I mean, I'm flexible. Fully turning to face him, Kurenai brought the full force of her glare, the glare that gave her the nickname the Ice Queen, a glare so cold it could freeze a man's heart at 20 paces. Asuma, no. I'm not going to date you. I love somebody else, and he loves me. So, well, I'm flattered, no, thank you. The two walked off, talking about visiting someone. Asuma blinked, shocked by the blunt and quite succinct dismissal. Wow. You just got burned by the Ice Queen. Kakashi commented, nose to book. I told you man, complicated sucks. The smoking jonin slowly pulled another cigarette from a pack and lit it, exhaling a cloud of smoke. Is that strip club offer still open? Yup. Since there were barely any people living in the apartment complex that Naruto owned, aside from Samui, Yujido, Mikoto, Suki, Satsu and now Ila and Mira, they paid for a few of the walls to be knocked down and the rooms brought together to make a gym dojo. Naruto slid door to the dojo open, hearing a few grunts of exertion and shouts of effort that came from sparring. He leaned in and peeked in on the sparring floor, seeing Suki and Yujido in the middle of an intense spar. Deciding to let them finish, Naruto moved on to the gym. There, he found Samui. She was on her back, hefting a barbell with several weights down to her chest, and then back up. She wore a pair of tight shorts and a sports bra, along with bandages wrapped around her hands and wrists, and not much else. She grunted as she brought the bar down to barely touch her chest, and then pushed it back up, a light sheen of sweat making her skin shine in the light from sun. Samui had grown taller, Naruto noted with a small smile. Her hair had gotten a little longer, and she tied it back to keep the blonde tresses out of her eyes. She had also gotten a few inches taller, now just below 5'8". He padded forward, his bare feet making barely any noise. It was enough to get Samui's attention, however. Her cold blue eyes flicked over to glance at him, then returned to staring at the ceiling as she counted off repetitions. It took 2 seconds before her brain registered what she had seen, and her eyes went wide, before she nearly dropped the bar on herself. Naruto rushed over and helped lift the bar back onto the stand as Samui sat up, and stared at him with wide, glazed eyes. "Naruto?" she asked in a pained whisper. He smiled softly at her and nodded. "Yeah. I'm back, Samui-chan." She leaped at him, and wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face into the side of his neck, small sobs shaking her frame. He wrapped his arms around her, one hand stroking the back of her neck lightly. "I'm sorry, Samui-chan. I would have told you about Sume and I, but I didn't want you to think I was some man whore who slept with everyone who gave him a sultry look. I didn't want to damage the relationship we had just started building, and instead I hurt you. And I'm sorry. So sorry for that," Naruto whispered to her, pressing light kisses to her ear. Samui gently smacked him on the back of the head, her face still pressed to his neck, her nose inhaling his scent. "Baka," she mumbled. "I should be the one apologizing to you. I knew that it was a possibility that you would be involved with others, we all knew. And I attacked you, just because I thought you didn't care about me. I hate the fact that I lost control of myself like that. Can you forgive me?" Naruto gently pulled her back and softly pressed their lips together. "I forgave you a long time ago. Can you forgive me?" She chuckled wetly, and kissed him tenderly. "There's nothing to forgive, Naruto. Why don't we just agree that we could have handled ourselves better, and leave it at that?" He smiled and hugged her tightly. "You have no idea how badly I missed you, Samui. I missed your eyes, the way they would sparkle every time we had fun. I missed the way you would smile little smiles when you thought something was funny. I missed the way your cheeks would go pink when I complimented you. But most of all, I missed you the most, Samui-chan. I miss holding you at night, and waking up to your peaceful face in the morning. I miss the cute little moans you made whenever I gave you a massage. And I miss the way you would squeeze me when we kissed." She looked up into his eyes, and pulled him down to meet her lips. When they separated, she smiled softly, her cheeks pink. "I miss you too," she said simply. Everything else didn't need to be spoken. Samui locked her arms around his neck and pushed forward, sending him to the ground with her on top, her lips passionately molded to his, her tongue sneaking into his mouth to tangle with his. "I want you," she murmured with gleaming eyes. "I wanted you then, and I want you even more now." Naruto cursed himself in his head. "Samui-chan, I can't do that." Her crossed her blue orbs. "Why not?" she said plaintively. He reached up and kissed her, driving that look away from her face. "Not yet. I still need to see the others. What would they think if they walked in here and saw you kissing me?" Samui frowned for a second, before she shrugged and mashed their lips together, digging in his mouth with her tongue. "Fuck them," she whispered breathily. "I don't care if they see anything. I need you." To emphasize this point, she reached down and grabbed one of his hands, placing it on her ass with a smile. Naruto groaned and flipped them over. "I can't. Not yet. Believe me, I want to. Mara, do I want to? But how would you feel if you walked in on me in Yujido?" Samui groaned in defeat and slumped, her head resting on the ground. "Fine." Naruto titled her head up and pressed down on her, letting her feel the length of what seemed to be diamond in his pants press against her core. "I promise you, Samui, we will consummate this. I don't care what else happens today, we will have our time." He kissed her softly, full of promise. The blonde Kunoichi grinned up at him. "You better keep that promise." Naruto pushed himself back to his feet and helped her up. "I never break a promise, Samui." The door to the gym opened, showing the two previously sparring Kunoichi sweaty and bruised. Suki had a towel over her head, drying the sweat out of her hair, while Yujido had hers around her neck, and she spotted Naruto first. She didn't say a word, she just dashed past Suki and jumped onto Naruto, wrapping her arms around his neck and her legs around waist, squeezing as if she was afraid he would fade like a mirage. "I knew you would be back." Yujido breathed, taking in his scent. "I knew it." She pulled back and lunged forward, smashing their mouths together, kissing him almost desperately. "I'm sorry," Naruto said once she pulled away. Yujido nodded into the side of his neck. "Me too." Taking the time he had, Naruto examined the blonde Jinchuriki. Her hair had been cut shorter, the long braid only reaching down to mid-back instead of her legs. She'd also gotten taller, coming up to his chest, and from what he could feel with her chest pressed to his and the hands he had holding her up, she'd gotten curvier as well. She leaned back, loosening her arms and cupping his cheeks, staring into his red with her aqua eyes. She pressed forward and softly kissed him, running a hand through his hair. "I miss you so much." He stroked her back and replied, "I miss you too." Yujido stared into his eyes with a sad gleam. "Don't do that again, Naruto." She hit his chest lightly, tears brimming in her eyes. "There's something I want to tell you." Naruto pressed a finger to her lips, cutting off what she wanted to say. You can tell me later, Yujiro-chan. Right now, all that matters is that I'm here and you're here. She smiled slightly and hugged him once more. You're right. I don't think it's the right time to say it yet. A tap on her shoulder brought Yujiro out of her reverie, and she turned to see Suki standing there with an impatient look on her face. Huffing, the blonde Jinchuriki pressed a chaste but happy kiss to the blonde Jinchuriki's lips, before walking over to stand with her sister. Suki stared at Naruto, her Sharingan activated, memorizing every surface of his face. Without warning, she lunged forward, and clumped her mouth over his, furiously kissing him, as if she was afraid that he would fade away like dust in the wind. Vegito and Samui looked away from the scene with jealousy in their minds, before realizing that jealousy is what caused the problem in the first place. And while it wouldn't go away, they both made a pact with themselves to learn how to deal with it, or at least keep it from affecting their love lives too badly. Whether or not the others did, was not their problem. Suki finally broke away when she could no longer breathe. Damn, Suki. Naruto muttered. We haven't even gone on a date yet. The youngest Uchiha smiled and laid her head on his chest, content just to stay there. We'll fix that eventually. She murmured to herself. Just don't keep me waiting for too long, okay? They simply held each other, reveling in the atmosphere that comes from two best friends coming back together after a long time apart. I didn't know you even thought of me that way. Naruto said quietly, lightly stroking her back. You were there for me after the massacre, even if you didn't know who I was. You've stuck by me for more than half of my life, even when I went through my arrogant emo phase. There was no way anyone else could compare. Suki said truthfully. They separated, Suki coughing to hide the blush lighting her cheeks and failing miserably. Ahem. I should be going. I need to shower and, yeah. The Uchiha heir stashed out of the room, unused to showing that much emotion in front of people not her best friend and her mother. Laughing awkwardly, Naruto turned to the two sisters with a sheepish smile. I should go. There are more people I need to see. The two blonde sisters nodded and made to leave. Yujiro kissed his cheek on the way out, and Samui gave him a smoldering kiss followed by an equally smoldering look, reminding him of his promise. Naruto sighed, watching them leave. I'm glad to be back. Immediately after opening the door, he ran into Mikoto, literally. The once retired Jonin recovered after bouncing off the mostly dragon, and squeezed the life out of him once she realized just who she had run into. I knew you were still alive. Mikoto stated firmly, her hand stroking the back of his head, while the other was tightly wrapped around his shoulders. I could feel it. And you were right, as always, Mikoto-chan. Naruto said softly. While he had once looked on her as a mother figure, Naruto had changed that view after Alduin's memories started filtering in, and he felt older than he actually was. He realized that she was a one-of-a-kind woman, and not someone you could find in every village. He just had no way of knowing if she felt the same, which was why her sudden interest in him was so startling. Mikoto pressed on the back of his neck and leaned up, planting her lips firmly on his. There was no tongue play, or even groping involved, just two lovers reuniting with a tender kiss that sent shivers down their spines, holding the promise of more down the line. She separated from him with a small smile and shimmering eyes, hastily wiping away happy tears that threatened to fall. Well now, I guess I have something to gossip with the other ladies like the old woman I am. Naruto grinned at her and playfully pinched one of her butt cheeks. Old lady, my ass or your ass. It is quite fine, taut and firm, with not even a single modicum of sag to be found anywhere. Not to mention the rest of your body. The Uchiha matriarch lightly slapped his chest with a smile. Oh, you beast. Don't go giving in to your beastly urges on this poor old woman. What would the Hokage say? The dragon man thought for a second, and then smiled brightly. Good job. They shared a laugh, which died down until they were staring at each other with small smiles. Mikoto pressed a gentle kiss to his lips, and let go of his waist. I'm glad you're back, Naruto-kun. I'm glad too, he replied, watching as she walked away. I'm not going anywhere, and you know where to find me. She turned and blew a kiss at him with twinkling eyes. Yes, I definitely know where you sleep, Naruto-kun. Sleep tight. Naruto shook his head at her teasing, and walked to his room. Opening the door, he sighed at the familiar smells of his home. I'm finally home. The place was clean, which was kind of surprising given that the sex-crazed crazy sexy, and just plain crazy Satsuruko lived with him. The only real reminder that she lived there was the scattered magazines on the coffee table, being equal parts weapon magazines and porn, much like the woman herself. His room was much the same, clean except for the rumpled covers of his bed, with the addition of his ebony bow, along with a scroll sitting on top of his dresser with candles around it. This must be some kind of memorial. Naruto thought to himself, a sad smile curling his lips. They must have thought I was dead. I don't blame them. What's in the scroll, though? He pulled the scroll off of his dresser and rolled it open, finding a few weapon and clothes seals. Pressing his fingers to the first seal and channeling his chakra, Naruto opened the seal, finding a black sword with a sharp, curved silver edge along the blade that was slightly bent with silver filings along the side along with a sheath made of tough leather. The first sword Tenten and I ever made together. That same batch of ore was made into my bow and dagger too. He reminisced to himself. Naruto sheathed the blade and set it aside, opening the next seal and finding his dagger. He flipped it around and sheathed that as well. The next seal brought forth the Dawnbreaker, the miniature sun shining in the golden hilt of the solid silver blade that pulsed with veins of sunlight all along the length. Naruto swung the blade lightly, the low hum of restrained power singing through the air. I knew you would be back to wield my blade, my champion. A musical whisper floated through his thoughts, bringing to mind a grassy meadow bathed in sunlight. The voice faded after, but left feelings of pride and joy behind. Naruto set Dawnbreaker aside, and unsealed the last seal. Waving away the smoke, he found his pouches, one full of potions, another full of small scrolls and another full of throwing weapons, and his hidey 8, which he tied around his arm. All of these weapons reminded him of one person he so badly wanted to see. Tenten. He thought, setting the pouches down. I've put this off long enough. Time to see her. Naruto slung the bow over his shoulder and left his apartment. He took to the street, easily ignoring the stares and whispered words. As he passed by the Yamanaka flower shop, he peered inside and waved at Ino and Sakura, who were chatting near the counter. He continued on his way, waiting for the impending explosion with a small smile, and he was not disappointed. A loud squeal erupted from the shop, followed by 2 human missiles, one pink and the other blonde. 2 bodies slammed into Naruto's back, and 2 happy voices rang in his ears. You're back. They shouted in unison, Ino with her arms around his neck and Sakura fastened onto his arm. Naruto reached back and pulled Ino away from his back, and brought both of them in for a 3-way hug. While they weren't best friends, Ino and Sakura had always been friendly to him. The 2 girls were best friends, and one was rarely seen without the other, to the point that some were sure that they were in a relationship. He never asked, and it's not like he really cared, they could do whatever they wanted. The 2 girls were similar in some aspects, but different in a few meaningful ways. Ino was the heiress of the small and tight-knit Yamanaka clan, who had a focus on manipulating mental states, their own and others. Sakura's dad was an Aburame, from which she gained his bright green eyes and fine chakra control. And although her dad was still part of the Aburame clan, he couldn't get his daughter recognized as the same, nor was he able to get her hive. Their mother, conversely, had only made it genin, and was the head of a large civilian union, mainly consisting of food and jewelry merchants and a few restaurants. Ino liked to keep her hair long in a high ponytail with a few bangs covering her left eye, and preferred to wear skirts and tank tops, mostly deep purple or soft yellow in color. Sakura kept her soft pink hair shoulder length, and tied her hidey 8 in such a way that it left her face clear, and often wore red battle dresses and tight shorts. The blonde genin focused on ninjutsu and genjutsu, and was pretty good with the shuriken in her pouch, and the senbon hidden in her arm warmers. The pink genin focused mainly on medical jutsu and taijutsu, being surprisingly strong with such a lithe frame and nearly perfect chakra control. And they were different in another way. Ino was developing into a full-figured young woman, with her modest breasts and shapely legs being the more outstanding aspects of her body. Sakura would never be voluptuous, but she had a lithe, athletic body with toned arms and full rear end that was very appealing, and she could never be called flat-chested. Naruto pulled back from the hug, and grinned as the 2 girls settled under his arms with their arms across his back. Hey ladies, you're looking good, since I last saw you. The 2 girls smiled appreciatively. You want to talk, Mr. Muscles? Ino replied teasingly, patting his abdomen. You know, I've always liked the ripped guys. Wink wink, nudge nudge. Sakura rolled her eyes at her friend. Geez Ino, why don't you just drop your skirt and bend over? I think that would be more subtle. The dragon man chuckled, and squeezed the pink Kunoichi. It's just teasing, I'm fine with it. Both Kunoichi glanced at each other, then at Naruto. No, it's not. Sakura said incredulously. Have you thought that we've been teasing you this whole time? Naruto looked at the 2 Kunoichi in surprise. Wait, you haven't been teasing me? Ino shook her head slowly. No, you're like, the only guy in our age group that we want to be with. What, really? Now Naruto was truly shocked. What about the other guys? Like who, Shikamaru? The blonde genin scoffed. Yeah, right. He's so damn lazy I doubt he even masturbates. And he's dead set on his dream of marrying a girl who's not too pretty, but not ugly, and having 2 kids. I think that's the only thing he wouldn't be lazy about. Plus, he's like a brother to me, same with Choji. Sakura pulled a face. Choji's a nice guy, but I wouldn't kiss him unless I'm desperate for a full meal. Besides them, there's only Kiba, and he's ornery, like, all the damn time. Plus, he constantly smells like dog. And not the good kind, either. Wet dog that likes to eat its own poop. Ino wrinkled her nose. Okay, you, Sakura. And Shino is, well, he's just kind of weird. The pink genin looked at her best friend oddly. Shino's a girl, Ino. What, really? The Yamanaka heiress sputtered. Naruto nodded. Yeah, I had no idea until she took her jacket off. It really hides a lot. He withdrew his arms around the 2 and turned to face them. Are you 2 being serious here? You want to date me? Ino shrugged. Well, not really date. We're young, and a serious relationship just isn't something either of us wants right now. We want it to be a casual thing. Yeah, Sakura interjected. We heard about you and Sume and Yuzuka, and we wanted something like that. Not super serious, but like friends with benefits. I think I could do that, Naruto said, scratching his head. This was a first. Most of the other girls he was with sort of treated each other as rivals for his affections. It was kind of jarring for them to tell him that they only wanted a casual relationship, and so easily too. Cool. They cheered, giving each other a high five. So, do you want to do it here? Ino asked, looking around at the forested area they had walked into. Not my first choice for where to have sex my first time, but I can handle it. Naruto waved his hand. Not right now. I just got back, and I need to see some people. The blonde snapped her fingers while Sakura nodded. I get that. We'll come around later, okay? He smiled at them and nodded. Sure. As he made to leave, he heard Ino's voice from behind. Wait, Naruto. As he turned around, Ino pushed Sakura forward. Come on, you called dibs. So go do it or I will. A deep blush lit up the pinkette's face as she shuffled towards him. Hey, Naruto, can you close your eyes? Slightly confused, Naruto complied, shutting his eyes. He heard her slowly come closer until they were nearly face to face. Then he felt something soft and slightly wet press against his lips. Opening his eyes halfway, Naruto peeked out and saw Sakura's red face, and tightly shut eyes as she kissed him tentatively. He felt her tongue hesitantly poke his lips, asking for entrance, and he allowed her into his mouth. She felt all around, probing the surface of his cheeks, and teeth and finally tangling with his own, slightly longer and rougher tongue. Taken by surprise at the sudden oral embrace, Sakura moaned out loud. Realizing what she was doing, her eyes shot open and she sprinted away, cheeks glowing brightly. Ino laughed as she glimpsed her best friend's visage. Pussy, she called after the retreating head of pink hair. Come here. The blonde shouted, jumping at Naruto, wrapping her legs around his waist, and her arms around his neck, seizing his head and pulling their lips together fiercely. Whereas Sakura was hesitant, Ino was not. She immediately grabbed his tongue and brought it into her mouth, sucking and fencing wildly with it. After several minutes of sloppily making out, Ino hopped down from the slightly dazed Naruto, and wiped the saliva and smeared lipstick from her mouth. And that's just a taste, big boy. She winked at him and skipped away, shaking her hips at him as she went. Dazed, Naruto stared after her until the purple-clad Genin faded from view. Okay, then. Pores, Kyuubi muttered sullenly in his head. Oh, so you'll have a casual relationship with them, but not with me. So unfair. Ember wailed. Alduin sniffed, wiping a tear away with a talon. I'm so proud of you, son. Shut up, you leathery old bat. You're just a jealous, Yupensing Thorug. Oh, you wanna go, flying umbrella, then bring it on. Kyuubi shouted, leaping to her paws with her tails thrashing behind her. Oh please, you are thousands of years too young to even touch me, punk bitch. Alduin retorted smoothly, chin high, not even glancing in Kyuubi's direction. That's it. She roared, baring her fangs. I'm a vixen, you son of a. The gray-black dragon waved a hand at her dismissively. You all look alike to me. The Kyuubi screamed in rage, leaping through the bars at Alduin, claws extended, her entire being screaming bloody murder. The World Eater sighed and muttered, ice. A wave of ice-blue energy fled from his mouth, encasing the leaping fox completely in ice. She hit the ground with a loud thunk, where Alduin blew on her, sending her ice form back into her cage. He sighed and nodded to himself. Still got it. Naruto tried to ignore the by-play going on inside his head as he approached the weapons shop, Higurashi's weapons for violent occasions, from where he could hear the sounds of metal striking metal. Someone must be at the forge. The door slid open easily, the chiming of the bell lost in the hammering coming from the back of the shop. Tenteki Higurashi was napping with his feet propped up on the counter, his head leaning against a wall as he snoozed. Naruto carefully stepped over the sleep man and stepped into the forge, not even feeling the wave of heat that rolled out of the entrance. There, he found Tenten, clad in a heavy leather apron, bringing a hammer down on a chunk of white-hot metal repeatedly, slowly shaping it into the form she desired. He just watched her for a few minutes, admiring her stance and the strength evident in her arms as she swung the hammer, taking in the fierce expression on her face, and the sweat running down her face. Tenten. Naruto spoke up. Taken by surprise, the weapon-using Kunoichi jerked, accidentally throwing the metal lump through the air at his face. Naruto reached out and caught the chunk before it could hit him with his bare hands, not bothered by the hot metal. He slowly strode over to Tenten and placed the piece aside, staring into her brown eyes intensely. Tenten set her hammer down and looked back, slowly enclosing him in her arms. I really did think you were dead, you know. She murmured to him, her eyes never leaving his. It nearly killed me, imagining a world without you. I could barely even function. Naruto kept silent, just bringing a hand up to brush away a stray tear from her face. But then, I realized that, since you were only missing, there was still a chance for you to still be alive, even if it was small. And that was all I needed. Tenten gently pulled down on his head, bending his neck until their lips finally met. It was a slow burn, low and hot and passionate. Naruto wrapped his arms around her, melding their bodies together almost completely as they kissed. Minutes later, they finally separated. Tenten rested her head on his chest, hiding her face from view. He could feel small shakes traveling through her body as her fingers gripped the back of his neck. "You were my first friend," she said shakily. "The first person to make me feel real after my mom died. My first crush. My first kiss. My first love." Tenten laughed lowly, and brushed her face against his neck. "I say first, but I mean only, there hasn't ever been anyone that I've ever thought of being with besides you, Naruto." She looked up, tears running down her face. "I know I'll never be your only one, but I don't care. I don't care what place I have in your heart, Naruto, as long as I'm there. I don't care about who comes along, who you sleep with, who you love, as long as I'm there. So please." Tears streamed from her eyes as sobs began to rack her frame. "Please, please don't leave me, please, please stay with me, please, tell me you love me, because I love you, so much, don't leave me." Naruto reached down, and lifted her chin, pressing his lips to hers. She crushed her body to his, desperation leaking through the kiss, her need for him, and his love palpable in the air. "Tenten," he whispered as they parted again. "I'll never leave you, never. I promise. And you know that I never break a promise." She didn't reply, only throwing herself back on him, and kissing him fiercely. He stumbled back as she furiously tangled tongues with him. They broke apart as Tenten pushed his jacket along with the bow to the floor, followed by her apron, her shirt and the bindings she kept wrapped around her chest. They were both naked from the waist up. Tenten panted as he clasped his hands on her rear, and pulled her up, locking her legs around his waist, and meeting him halfway in another sloppy kiss. Naruto set her on a nearby bench, brushing the tools on the surface away. He left her lips and attached his to the underside of her ear and sucked lightly, nipping at her earlobe with his sharp teeth. She could feel the hard length of his arousal press against the fork of her legs, and Tenten gasped as pressure began to grow inside her. She moaned as Naruto moved down to her neck, his long and rough tongue licking over the pulse points in her throat. Her legs tightened around him, pressing him closer to her. A low, throaty moan escaped her mouth as Naruto went lower, lavishing attention on the valley of her breasts, licking over the meat of the nicely sized orb, before attaching to her left nipple. Naruto had her nipple in his mouth, and was gently sucking and nipping at it, feeling the pressure in his abdomen growing as their cores rubbed together through their pants. Their hips moved slowly in concert as pleasure built between them, until it reached a boiling point. Tenten threw her head back, releasing a long, pleasured groan that was cut off as Naruto grabbed her head, and pulled her down to kiss him as they both finally came. Her eyes were closed as the tide broke inside them, washing over them in a wave of pleasure. As they came down, Naruto was moving back down to her chest, when Tenten let out a strangled mix between a moan and gasp of shock that sounded like Kirk. Whipping around, Naruto could see why. Standing inside the door to the forge was his sensei, Yuga Uzuki. Her eye was twitching slightly with a small line of red crossing her cheeks with her arms crossed over her chest, with the paw print tattoo standing out on her pale skin. Ahem. She coughed into her hand, a look of irritation on her face. "Naruto, we have a mission. I don't know what it is yet, but we shouldn't be gone for more than a day. Meet me outside when you're finished." The sentence finished with a tinge of distaste as Yugao exited the building, stepping over the still sleeping form of Jinchuriki. Naruto and Tenten traded embarrassed looks before looking away. "I should go take a shower," she muttered, grabbing her shirt and slipping it back on as Naruto snagged his coat. "Wait a second," he said, laying a hand on Tenten's shoulder. He held the ebony longbow out to her. She looked down at the weapon and back up to Naruto in shock. "Why do you want me to have this?" she asked lowly. "During my time away, I got another bow, a powerful, enchanted bow that used to belong to the Lord of Huntsmen." "Persine?" Tenten questioned, her face scrunched up cutely. He nodded. "Yeah, him. He gave me a bow, and I want you to have this one. It's the first weapon we ever made together, and I've always thought of you when I used it. I want you to do the same for me." Tenten took the bow and stood on her toes and pressed a soft kiss to Naruto's lips. "I will." She walked off with the bow pressed to her chest as Naruto went out the back door, and cleaned himself off with the hose. He joined his sensei at the front and they took off, running for the Hokage Tower, both quietly thinking to themselves. Yugao found herself both irritated and jealous for reasons she couldn't figure out, with the image of her student and his friend locked in a passionate embrace being the thing that kick-started her frustration and envy. But why? Naruto couldn't stop thinking of the words that Tenten had said to him, and couldn't help but feel like a bastard. She had poured her heart out to him, made it known that she only wanted him to love her, so badly that she cried her heart out for him. And he felt guilty. She didn't care if he was intimate with other women, as long as he loved her, and he did, but Naruto felt that Tenten deserved more than someone who was basically forced to love more than one woman. At first, he thought he should blame both the clan creation act and himself, but with Tabella's interference becoming known to him, he now knew what had driven him to develop feelings for so many. He felt sorry for Tabella, he honestly did, but her manipulations of his mind in the womb had caused him more than a fair share of trouble, and he was not happy with the goddess of beauty. They arrived at the tower to find their teammates at the mission's office, standing at the ready in front of the Hokage. Naruto took his place between the two blondes formerly of Kumo with a smile directed at them, and the aged Hokage behind the desk. Good afternoon, Team Yugao. I have a mission for you. It's a simple C rank to the town of Machi. He blew out a smoke ring, and casually tossed a sealed scroll to Yugao. Deliver the document to the client, and get his signature. That is all, you are dismissed. The team jumped out of the window, and the Sandaime leaned back with a smirk on his face. He tapped the bowl of his pipe against the side of the desk to empty it, and brought out a tin of his special tobacco, stuffing his pipe with the herb, and lighting it with a small puff of fire. You know, this could be misconstrued as favoritism, Koharu said quietly, sipping a cup of tea. The older man shrugged carelessly, and took a long pull of his pipe. I don't care, Koharu. I'm an old man, the opinions of the others shouldn't really matter to me. I am 60, after all. He blew out the smoke, and sipped his own cup. Plus, I'm the Hokage. I can do what I want with my ninja. The old lady let it go and held her hand out for the pipe. Can pass that. My hip's been acting up again. Don't take all of it again, Koharu, or I'll have Konohamaru steal your prunes. As jumped through the trees to the east gate, Naruto suddenly stopped. Hey sensei, can we stop off somewhere quickly? Yugao looked back at him and nodded. Machi isn't too far from here, only about 7 hours. Sure. He nodded to his sensei and dropped out of the tree in front of the Hyuga compound. The guards at the gate nodded to him and let him pass unhindered, and he strode through the garden, looking for two particular Hyuga. They would either be training or eating lunch at this time of day, so the dining room was his first stop. Inside, he found the two Hyuga heads sitting at the table as their daughters chatted happily. They turned to look at the opening door, two pairs of lavender-tinted white eyes whitened as they saw the visage of their crush in the doorway. Twin cries of Naruto sounded out as Hinata and Hanabi very quickly and very primly jogged around the table to tackle the dragon man to the floor. The brown-haired sister was squeezing tightly on his neck as she chattered about how happy she was, and the things that had happened to her while he was gone, and questions about the things that had happened to him while he was gone. Hinata had her face pressed into his chest, to hide the blush on her face as she attempted to squeeze the air out of his lungs. Naruto hugged him back as Hanabi finally ran out of air. It's good to see you two again, I missed you. The purple-haired sister looked up at him with a radiant smile and spoke. Naruto, now that you're back, will you take me out on a date? Hanabi glared at her sister before she grabbed Naruto's head and pressed it into her modest chest. No, he's going to take me on a date first. Hinata frowned at her sister. That's not fair, I asked him first. Naruto spoke from his cage of breasts. She did ask me first. The slightly younger sister pushed away from Naruto and pouted, crossing her arms, mumbling to herself. Stupid Ni-chan, asking first, stupid Naruto for accepting. He chuckled and sat up, putting an arm over her shoulder, planting a kiss on her cheek. Don't worry about it, Hanabi-chan, I'll take you on a date after, okay? Hanabi nodded and giggled girlishly with a blush on her face. Hinata sat next to Naruto and looked at him with wide watery eyes. Can I have a kiss too? She asked, trying to ignore the blood rushing to her face. Naruto smiled and kissed her cheek too. She leaned over and put her head against the table, trying to avoid having people see her steaming, love-struck face. Hiashi looked at his brother, and cocked an eyebrow challengingly. In response, his twin pointed at Nichiko and Naruto, who were hugging as the branch Hyuga lovingly pecked his cheeks. Hiashi looked back and narrowed his eyes, pointing to his daughters. I have the advantage. Hisashi smirked and turned his nose up at his brother. So you say. The Hyuga head gave his brother the finger under the table, and turned a welcoming smile to Naruto. Naruto, welcome back to Konoha. Please, join us for lunch. You can sit next to my daughters. Dear brother, the table would be even if he sat next to my daughter. Please, Naruto, have a seat next to Nichiko-chan. Hisashi said, shooting his brother a triumphant look. Naruto scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. Sorry, but I can't. I have a mission to go on. The two sisters looked up at the shinobi with angry looks in their eyes, not directed at him, but at the Hokage. What? They shrieked in concert. You just got back. Hiashi nodded in agreement. My beautiful and passionate daughters have a point, Naruto. This is rather unusual. Nichiko looked at Naruto. It's not a very long mission, is it? Hisashi looked to the dragon shinobi. My skilled and pretty daughter also has a point, Naruto. Is it a long mission? He shook his head. No, I should be back by tomorrow afternoon at the latest. Nichiko glanced searchingly at her father and mouthed, what are you doing? Her father pointed at himself, then her, then Naruto. I'm trying to set you up. A look of realization dawned on her face and she nodded, giving her father a discreet thumbs up. I'm sorry I can't stay. Naruto apologized. Perhaps I can come by for lunch tomorrow. That would be just fine. Both brothers answered in concert, before shooting each other an irritated look. Naruto cocked an eyebrow at the brothers and made to leave. Alright, I'll see you later. Hinata-chan, does 2 days from now work for our date? The purple-haired sister nodded eagerly, and blew a kiss to him, blushing all the while. Hanabi frowned slightly but also blew a kiss at her crush as he left. As Naruto made his way to the entrance of the compound, he nearly ran into Shino as she walked through the garden. Shino, he said loudly, engulfing the Kunoichi in a hug. I'm sorry, but I've really got to go. When I come back, let's meet up, so we can get to know each other better. He swore he could see a streak of red cross her cheeks, but it was hidden as she pulled her collar up. I would like that, she mumbled. Great. He let her go and pecked her temple in a friendly manner. Naruto joined up with the rest of his team, unaware that Shino had fainted after his gesture. They signed out at the gate and dashed into the trees, running easily across the branches like a paved street. For hours, they ran, stopping only twice for quick breaks. Finally, as the sun began to descend, they made it Machi, a small town in the middle of a large clearing. Yugao pulled out the scroll and looked at the recipient, scowling at the name she found. What is it, sensei? Yujiro asked, seeing the foul look on the former Anbu's face. The person we're supposed to deliver this to is Jiraiya of the Sanin, she said grudgingly. Samui cocked an eyebrow in question. Is that bad? Yugao sighed and put the scroll away. For us, the ladies, yes. Saying that, she zipped up her vest, covering her chest. You might want to cover up, Samui. The cold Kunoichi blinked. I didn't bring any extra clothing. Naruto slipped off his leather jacket and held it out for Samui. Here, use this. Samui blushed almost invisibly and slipped the jacket on, zipping it up to her throat. Thanks. You haven't said why, sensei. The purple jonin crossed her arms and huffed. He's a pervert who peeks on women to get inspiration for his series, Icha. Ichido froze for a second but kept walking, vowing to burn the copy she had at home at her first chance. It wasn't because it was a lewd book, it was because it was inspired by an invasion of privacy. And that was just wrong. True to her word, the team found a man with long gray hair and a spiky ponytail and kabuki clothes peeking through a hole in the wall surrounding a women's hot spring, giggling quietly to himself and scratching notes down on a pad of paper. Simultaneously, all 3 women felt violated. Naruto was confused. Perhaps it was because he had basically grown up with women, but the peeking this man was doing just seemed odd. Why peek when you can get a woman and see everything during sex? Jiraiya of the Sanin? Yugao asked in tense tone of voice. He whipped around, stuffing his notebook away. Oh, hey ladies, I was just checking the integrity of this fence. Yugao scoffed. The wall has about as much integrity as you do, she whispered to herself. Jiraiya looked at Naruto and winked. You must be really lucky, having 3 babes on your team. Naruto blinked at the angry yelling coming from the Kyuubi in his head. Seems that she really values privacy. And you're a pervert. The older man scoffed and started hopping on one foot, wiggling his fingers. I'm not just a pervert, I am a super perv. The scroll bounced off his head, interrupting him mid-yell. The Hokage sent us to deliver this document to you, Yugao said with irritation. The pervert rubbed his forehead and opened the scroll, looking over whatever was there and nodding, before writing something down and handing it to Naruto. The younger shinobi rolled the scroll open discreetly and peeked at the information there. Hi. Here's Insir Toby. What up, Jiraiya? Well now that your mission is accomplished, why don't? No? The Jonin cut him off, motioning to her team, and they ran off. Well fine then. Jiraiya muttered to himself, turning back to the hole in the wall. A blue fireball streaked from nowhere and smacked into his ass, lighting his pants on fire, making him jump into the nearest source of water, which just happened to be the hot springs, still full of ladies. When he surfaced, Jiraiya found himself menaced by several weapons, all held by angry women. Well, hello, ladies ow. A couple of hours later, the sun had set, and Team Yugao had set up camp for the night. After eating a meal of hunted rabbits, Yujiro settled into watch, and the others had gone to bed. Peeking out of her tent, Samui looked at her sister and waited for her to look out over the trees, before slinking into Naruto's tent, leaving a water clone formed from the contents of a water bottle to take her watch, when Yujiro was done with hers. She closed Naruto's tent and crawled over the still form of her fiancé until she was straddling him. His eyes flicked open, a question on his lips that was silenced as she closed her lips on his. When they parted, Naruto asked quietly, Samui, what are you doing? She pecked him again, and reached for the hem of her shirt. I want you, so badly Naruto, I can't wait any longer. With that said, Samui pulled her shirt over her head, and discarded the article of clothing, showing the light blue bra that encased her large chest, which was also quickly dropped to the ground. Naruto knew she wouldn't be talked out of this, and he didn't want to talk her out of it, so he quickly shimmied out of his pants, and helped Samui do the same. Quickly, he cast a spell that caused a muffled pop to sound in her ears, and at her questioning look, he explained. Muffling spell, so no one can hear us. She smiled and pressed herself against him, trapping his arousal between her thighs, so that it rubbed against her core, as her tongue played with his. One of Naruto's hands descended down her back and landed on one of her cheeks, kneading the muscle flesh there, getting a groan of approval from Samui. Suddenly, he flipped them over, so that he was on top, pinning her to the floor with his body, licking and nipping her neck, and kneading her breasts with his hands. He moved down, and began to suckle at her nipples, massaging the one he wasn't laying attention on. Samui moaned at his actions and reached a hand down between them to grab and stroke his arousal, rubbing it from base to tip and back again. Naruto made to move farther downward, but she grabbed his shoulders and stopped him. Not tonight. She panted. Next time, definitely, but tonight, I only want you inside of me. He nodded and moved back up to kiss her, rubbing the tip of his length against the wet lips of her slit. Slowly, he pushed in, groaning at the hot furnace that was squeezing so tightly around him. Samui grunted in discomfort at the sudden filling and stretching, but waited until he was reaching fully inside her to start moving. Almost immediately, pleasure burned in her like an inferno, making her sweat and gasp at the sensations of losing her virginity. Aware of her, it being her first time, Naruto moved slowly, slipping in and out of her core at a modest pace, letting the feelings wash over him. Samui's hands clenched, and her fingers dug into his back as a coil began to tighten inside of her. Naruto. She let loose a wail of pleasure as she almost impossibly tightened even further around him. Naruto thrust himself even deeper and let the tide wash over him as he came inside of the blonde kunoichi. Samui slumped under him, sweaty and panting, pleasured but nowhere near fulfilled. She pushed Naruto off of her and turned around, presenting herself for him to mount. I've dreamed about doing this with you. Please, fulfill my fantasy. Naruto responded by lining up and slipping back inside of her, making the newly deflowered kunoichi groan in ecstasy. Now that she was more used to the sensations, Samui urged the shinobi she was to be married to go faster. The sounds of flesh slapping against flesh echoed inside the tent, and not outside of it due to Naruto's spell. She collapsed on his chest, arms weak and eyes drooping from exhaustion. That was amazing. Samui managed to say as the world was fading fast. Naruto nodded in agreement and leaned down, placing a soft kiss to her lips before she fell asleep, a small, satisfied smile on her face. He pulled his blanket halfway over them and wrapped his arms around his lover, joining her in sleep. In the Raikage Tower in Kumagakure, the heavily muscled Raikage looked up from his desk with an odd look twisting his features. I suddenly want to murder someone brutally. Why? Outside of his office, his assistant heard his grumbling through the door. She glanced down at the stack of files in her arms, and decided that caution was the right decision, leaving the stack at her desk and checking out for the night. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification, and also check out the other videos that I have created, and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.